Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Daybreak, while uncertainty hangs over the upcoming inter-Korean family reunions after Seoul announces the dates of its annual military drills with Washington, a former U.S. diplomat visits Pyongyang, raising hopes he might secure the release of a detained American. President Park Geun-hye puts her foot down on the lax management and corrupt practices of public institutions, saying she will hold anyone who opposes and protests public sector reforms accountable. Plus, while a temporary ceasefire to allow civilians out of the besieged Syrian city of Homs is extended to Wednesday, a second round of peace talks in Geneva opens on shaky ground. Daybreak begins now.
Thanks for watching. You're watching Daybreak on Tuesday, February 11th. I'm Choi Yusun in Seoul. We start with a surprise trip to North Korea by former U.S. Ambassador to South Korea, Donald Gregg. While the specifics of his agenda have not been released, many believe Gregg is attempting to secure the release of Kenneth Bae, an American citizen who has been detained in North Korea for over 1 year. Our Paul Lee reports.
The former U.S. Ambassador Donald Gregg arrived in North Korea on Monday, accompanied by a group of 4 representatives from the Pacific Century Institute. According to Associated Press Television News, Gregg, who chairs the U.S. civic group, is leading the non-governmental delegation in Pyongyang. The North's official Korean Central News Agency also confirmed Gregg's arrival. However, the brief report did not give specifics on the purpose of his sudden visit. Upon his arrival, Gregg merely stated he was glad to be back without revealing further details of his mission.
Very happy to be back in Pyongyang, my first time in about 8 years, so we're looking forward to talks and happy to see you. Thank you.
Gregg served as Washington's envoy to Seoul from 1989 to 1993 and has since called for greater engagement with North Korea. Though still unclear, experts believe the unannounced trip is aimed at winning the release of Kenneth Bae, a Korean American who has been detained in the North for over a year. Bae was arrested by North Korean authorities after entering the country in November 2012 and was later sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for alleged crimes against the state. Gregg's visit also came just hours after North Korea revoked its second invitation for a U.S. special envoy to negotiate Bae's release. The planned trip by Ambassador Robert King was reportedly canceled due to the upcoming joint military drills between the U.S. and South Korea. Whether Gregg is aiming to free Bae, it shows that Pyongyang is still willing to engage in talks, raising hopes of a diplomatic breakthrough. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
South Korea has announced the dates for its annual military exercises with Washington. The drills, which North Korea strongly opposes, will start on February 24th. Pyongyang has yet to respond, but the announcement has cast doubt over the upcoming reunions for families separated since the Korean War. Our Hwang Sung-hee has more.
South Korea and the United States will begin their annual joint military drills in the last week of February, a plan that could jeopardize an earlier inter-Korean agreement to resume long-suspended reunions for families separated by the Korean War.
The ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command will hold the Key Resolve exercises, an annual defense training drill, from February 24th to March 6th. We also plan to hold the Foal Eagle exercises, which also take place every year, from February 24th to April 18th.
The dates coincide with the upcoming family reunions, scheduled for February 20th to the 25th at North Korea's Mount Kumgang Resort. The Defense Ministry said Pyongyang was informed of the dates on Sunday, but has not yet reacted to the plans. North Korea has, however, previously threatened to scrap the reunions should the South go ahead with the military exercises.
We're clearly stating that dialogue and invasive war games can never coexist, nor can reconciliation and conflict.
South Korea's unification ministry reiterated Monday the drills involving tens of thousands of troops are defensive in nature and should not disrupt plans for family reunions.
We have repeatedly explained that the key resolve exercises are annual defense training drills that will be conducted separately from the family reunion event. The South Korean government thinks the reunions must take place as planned, no matter what.
Millions of Koreans were separated from their families during the Korean War more than 6 decades ago, and some 70,000 South Koreans, most of whom are now in their 80s, are on a waiting list to see their loved ones one last time. Amid the uncertainty, South Korea has been preparing for the reunion event since last week. The Unification Ministry said that although Mount Kumgang saw over 1 meter of snow over the weekend, snowplows sent by South Korea have already removed most of the snow that's accumulated at the prospective reunion site. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And staying with the north, it appears as though Pyongyang is ready to conduct a fourth nuclear test. During a questioning session in Parliament on Monday, South Korean Defense Minister Kim Kwan-jin told lawmakers that preparations for a test at North Korea's main underground nuclear site in Punggye-ri appear to be complete. The site was used for the regime's third nuclear test last year. Kim also noted the North is in the early stages of preparing for a long-range missile test at its northwest launching site in Dongchang-ni. He assured the South Korean military is keeping a close watch on the movements there. And also in Parliament on Monday, Korea's top diplomat found himself fielding questions on the changing dynamics in Northeast Asia, noting Seoul's strengthened ties with Beijing since President Park Geun-hye took office 1 year ago this month. Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se said it's time to review the need for a military information sharing pact with China. He said such an agreement would further promote trust between the two countries. Yoon also touched on the recent tensions with Japan that have frozen high-level bilateral talks. He said the chill in relations was likely to continue until Tokyo demonstrates some sincerity over the historical differences that divide them, labeling the Shinzo Abe government's revisionist remarks the biggest obstacle. And also at the National Assembly, the rival political parties locked horns over President Park's reunification policies. Our Kim Hyun-ji has more on major differences between the two major parties.
On Monday, lawmakers questioned members of President Park Geun-hye's cabinet about the government's reunification policy. Just 1 month after the president said a unified Korea would be like hitting the jackpot. Ruling party lawmakers expressed support for the president's efforts, including her vision to create a peace park in the demilitarized zone.
I propose setting up a joint committee to establish a World Peace Park in the DMZ, made up of the two Koreas and the United Nations. This way, the project will engender cooperation from the international community.
While welcoming this idea and others, including making reunions of separated families more regular, Unification Minister Ryu Il-jae said inter-Korean relations must first improve. Some lawmakers expressed concern that the president's recent rhetoric suggests that Seoul supports a reunification scenario in which the South would absorb the North following an abrupt collapse. But Prime Minister Chung Hong-won said the Park administration does not support reunification by absorption, but rather one that is gradual and based on improved inter-Korean relations. At the hearing, the Democratic Party expressed opposition to the ruling party's North Korea human rights bill, arguing it supports civic groups that routinely send anti-North Korea leaflets.
If the bill is approved, North Korea human rights groups will get funding from the South Korean government. This raises fears that anti-North Korea groups will abuse the money taken from the state coffers.
To further thaw inter-Korean relations, opposition lawmakers demanded the government lift economic sanctions against Pyongyang that were put in place after the North's sinking of the South Korean warship Cheonan in 2010. However, the government said it would be premature to consider lifting the sanctions, known as the May 24th measures. On Tuesday, the National Assembly will resume the interpellation session with a focus on the economy. The nation's biggest personal data leak last month and the government's follow-on measures are expected to dominate the discussions. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
And a former U.S. point man on North Korea visiting Seoul this week had something to say about ways to curb Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program. Kim Hyun-gil has more.
Christopher Hill said the road to peace on the Korean peninsula will be a difficult one, but that stronger relations among Korea, China, and Japan could be the key to achieving the goal.
I think we could improve the North Korean attitude if we have better coordination and cooperation involving China and Japan. So my hope is that we can do that and that we can have a closer understanding of how to proceed in a six-party context.
Speaking in an address to the National Assembly on Monday, the former U.S. ambassador to South Korea, who also led the U.S. delegation to the six-party talks on denuclearizing North Korea, also spoke about the prospects for a resumption of the talks. He said that in the event the talks resume, the five parties of South Korea, the U.S., Japan, China, and Russia need to agree that Pyongyang not be allowed to have or develop nuclear weapons.
The North Korean commitment was to abandon all of its nuclear programs, and for this reason, that has to be the starting point, not the ending point of any subsequent negotiations.
Hill also took aims at hardliners in the U.S., who he said seemed to be more interested in criticizing negotiations with North Korea than preventing the North from having nuclear weapons. He said they are actually giving Pyongyang the hope that if they just stick to their guns, they will eventually be allowed to become a nuclear state in Northeast Asia. Mr. Hill said the most important part of any roadmap to peace and reunification for the two Koreas is that they do a lot more talking together. He also said the six-party talks are the best way to kickstart inter-Korean cooperation, describing them as a stepping stone towards reunification. Kim Hyun-gil, Arirang News.
If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world.
Return to the negotiation.
President Park Geun-hye plans, given the current circumstances.
On your way to work or at home.
Defense Ministry. The legislature will convene a...
Tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday.
President Park Geun-hye has expressed her determination to push ahead with plans to reform public enterprises that have been under fire for heavy debt and lax management. Our Park Ji-won has more on how the president also sent a warning to opponents of labor unions.
During a meeting of the president's senior secretaries Monday morning, President Park criticized state-owned companies for their lax management and called for reform. She pointed out that a number of public enterprises that are deeply in debt still offer their employees excessive benefits, even covering the tuition at foreign universities for some of their employees' children. She pledged to hold responsible anyone who tries to sabotage the reforms and said she is particularly concerned about recent opposition by unionists at some of the firms. She said the public companies need to regain the public trust by being proactive with their reform plans.
국민들은 어려움에 허리띠를 졸라매는데 공공부문에서 방만 경영을 유지하려고 저항한다면 국민들에게 그 실태를 철저히 밝혀야 합니다. 국민들에게 실상을 정확하게 알리고 공공기관 스스로 변화의 길을 갈 수 있도록 해야 할 것입니다.
President Park also criticized the lack of progress around her ambitious initiative dubbed Government 3.0, which aims to allow for wider public access to government information to ensure that state affairs are more transparent. She said the information is not being shared systematically and ordered fundamental improvements to her plan. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
There are signs Korea's IT industry has gotten off to a strong start this year. The nation's exports in the information and communications sector rose last month due to rising demand for local semiconductors and mobile phones. Our Hwang Jie has the details.
Korea's exports of IT products, which include semiconductors and mobile phones, inched up 0.2% last month from the same period a year earlier to $13.1 billion. The Trade Ministry said Monday that the rise in outbound shipments of IT products came in spite of a weak Japanese yen and financial instability in emerging economies. The Trade Ministry attributed the rise to growing shipments to ASEAN member countries and the European Union. Shipments of mobile phones in particular surged over 14% last month from the previous year to $2.1 billion. A more than 20% spike in exports of smartphones led the rise. Exports of semiconductors also rose about 15% to more than $4.5 billion. Shipments of display panels, however, fell more than 15% to $2.2 billion as exports to Korea's largest importer, China, plunged. Korea's imports of IT products, meanwhile, dropped 2.7% to $6.8 billion, spurring a 3.4% gain in the nation's trade surplus. The Trade Ministry expects the upward trend in IT exports to continue due to the economic recovery in Korea's major exporting markets like the United States and the European Union, along with the growing demand of smart gadgets in emerging economies. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
The economic outlook for most advanced economies is showing signs of firm growth for the first half of this year, with the overall recovery being led by the U.S. and Japan. In its latest economic report released Monday, the OECD says its leading indicator, covering 33 member countries, had reached its highest level in almost 3 years in December of last year, indicating that growth was firming. The OECD index showed the overall growth condition of the 33 member states was above trend, rising to 100.9 in the final month of 2013, edging up from 100.8 in November. Among the major emerging markets, the OECD said China, Brazil, and Russia maintained the same level of growth in December as they did in the previous month. A second round of talks aimed at bringing peace to Syria got off to a shaky start in Geneva on Monday. This as hundreds of civilians continue to flee the besieged city of Homs under an extended humanitarian deal between the Syrian government and the United Nations. UN Arab League envoy Lakhdar Brahimi has been holding separate meetings with the Syrian government and opposition delegations to try to set an agenda for the coming week. Little progress is expected as the two sides continue to disagree on the core issue of President Bashar al-Assad's future role in Syria. The talks come as the UN and aid agencies continue efforts to help thousands of people trapped in homes who now have until Wednesday to try and get out. Also in Syria, the international watchdog overseeing the elimination of the regime's chemical weapons stockpile says 1/3 of the arsenal has now left the country. Months after Typhoon Haiyan devastated the Philippines, engineers and medics from the Korean military are rebuilding schools and hospitals there and offering free medical care to local residents as part of ongoing relief efforts. Kim Hyun-bin sent us this report from Tacloban.
This is a cemetery for victims of Typhoon Haiyan in Leyte province, though some burials are not so formal and are marked by roadside plots. Large sections of the province were devastated last November when it was struck by what was one of the strongest tropical storms on record, which killed thousands and displaced millions more. For the survivors, there isn't much left, and international aid has poured in. Korea is one of the many countries that have sent relief workers to help the area rebuild. SGNL military engineers and medics chose the name Arirang, which means sun and hope in Tagalog, as a reminder of his mission to help the locals reach for a bright future. For now, the Arirang unit is focused on rebuilding schools and hospitals. They also provide free meals to roughly 500 children, as they have done each day since their arrival in late December.
This is one of the hospitals that was rebuilt by the Arirang unit. What's even more amazing is that they had it up and running in less than a month. Another step in helping the people here get back on their feet.
Apart from the engineers focused on reconstruction, there are dozens of doctors and nurses here, giving free medical care to area residents.
I just came here for check-up for my baby. For everything is free. Here in Telegrapo, no money, no medication for our illness.
Every member of the RAW unit is a volunteer who is trying to make a difference in the world.
The ARA unit's slogan is to become one and complete our mission for the good of humanity. With that in mind, we will give more of our love to the locals before our mission is complete.
The unit is providing free medical equipment and healthcare services to people in the 3 major districts in Leyte province that were hit the hardest by the typhoon. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Tacloban.
And a good Tuesday to you all as we kick off our Sochi coverage with the men's 500-meter speed skating event. Now, with Mo Tae-bum being one of the favorites to win a medal at the event, things didn't turn out the way everyone thought. Now, despite a fairly good start as he finishes the first race with the final time of 34.84 seconds, the South Korean speed skater finished the second race with the final time of 34.85 seconds for a combined 69.69 seconds to finish fourth overall. And while the Vancouver gold medalist failed to stand on the podium this time, the Netherlands continued to dominate the sport, sweeping all 3 medals as Mitchell Mulder, Jan Smeekers, and Ronald Mulder took the podium in the event. Well, the quest for Korea's first medal never got close during the men's 1500 short track event as Lee Han-bin was the only Korean skater to qualify for the finals. And it looked like the pressure was too much for the 25-year-old. And with Lee Han-bin never looking sharp in the final race, he would fall to 6th place in the final. But Russia's Victor An Hyun-soo did manage to finish with a bronze medal, claiming his first Olympic medal in 8 years. And while his third place finish gave some joy to the Korean fans, it was Charles Hamlin of Canada who finished first, followed by China's Tian Yu-han. Also, good news for all the fans here in the nation as the South Korean women's short track team dominated during the 500-meter and the 3,000-meter relay. Now, first off, all 3 Korean skaters Shim Seok-hee, Kim Ha-rang, and Park Seung-hee advanced during the 500-meter heats. But it was during the women's 3,000-meter relay semis where Park Seung-hee, Shim Seok-hee, Kong Sang-jung, and Cho Hae-ri absolutely dominated as they're set to go after the gold medal on the 18th. And now taking a look at some key competitions to look forward to on day 4 of the Sochi Winter Games for those following the Korean athletes. Now, first off, the women's curling team will be facing off against Japan during their round-robin session 2 as they hope to continue to surprise everyone in the sport. But the biggest event on the day will be speed skater Lee Sang-hwa going after her 2nd straight gold medal in the event as she hopes to claim Korea's first medal during the 500-meter women's speed skating event. All right, let's finish things off by taking a look at the medal count so far after 3 days of competition. Of course, taking a look at the chart here, Canada in first place after earning a late gold medal during the freestyle skiing event for a total of 3 gold, 3 silver, and 1 bronze. Netherlands in second with 3 gold medals as well, with Norway dropping down to 3rd place. Meanwhile, Russia now in 6th place with 6 medals so far. Well, that's going to wrap it up for me now. For this has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. While daily lows are dropped to minus side in most regions, and here in Seoul, we are starting out at a low of minus 6 degrees Celsius. So it's a cold start for most of our cities in Korea at this hour. But afternoon highs will rise to what we saw yesterday. Well, heavy snow in the East Coast seems to finally go away this afternoon. But till then, 15 centimeters of more snow is expected. But the rest of the country could have mostly to partly sunny day today. Now, the weather outlook for the rest of the week is looking calm and nice, I would say. Morning lows will stay in the minus side, but mercury levels should climb to mild side, so we can expect to have a little bit of a typical late winter weather pattern for this week. Also, the Korean Peninsula will see precipitation-free skies for the rest of the week, except Gangwon-do, where another band of snow is in store later this week. With that in mind, here are the readings for today. The morning low in Seoul is starting out at minus 6 and will get up to 4. Daegu and Gwangju will wake up to low of minus 3 and minus 5 and see a high of 4 and 6 respectively, while Busan should top out at 5 this afternoon. Now, for other regions, it looks like Jeju will climb up to 6, Daejeon will rise to 5, while the top temperature on Mount Kumgang will be at minus 11. Well, that's all from me at this hour, and let's send it back to Yusan in the studio.
Thank you, Jian, for that. And those are the stories we have for you this hour. Thank you for watching.